This one entity has perforated through the entirety of the Legend of Zelda lore. It marks the timeline throughout its entire history and is the pure embodiment of the hatred of demise. If you haven't figured out yet, we're talking about Ganondorf and Ganondorf Dragmire and how they have shaped what is the Legend of Zelda series. In my opinion, the most important villain in all of Legend of Zelda, and we're going to make a tier list of all of the incarnations of Ganon and Ganondorf throughout the timeline and kind of see who's the best, who has the best character arc, and all that jazz. Let's get into it. Let's first talk about the timeline and how I'm going to be orchestrating this tier list. First, I'm going to say right off the bat that we're not including Demise in this list because Demise is the thing that started the whole timeline, the thing that perpetrated the curse that inflicts the Legend of Zelda lore, and Ganondorf is just the embodiment of that hatred, the embodiment of that curse, and therefore is separate from the character Demise. I could go into a whole video on Demise if I wanted to, just by himself, and how he perforates, literally, throughout the entire world with his malice. However, we are just going to be talking about Ganondorf today, and Ganon and all of those incarnations, and why I think they are the most plot-driven character and most dynamic character in the entire Legend of Zelda series. And we're going to be looking at each different incarnation of this individual in timeline order. So we're going to be starting with Ocarina of Time, obviously, as Ganondorf Dragmire shows up, and then go through the timeline. This isn't the complete timeline now that we have Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but we're going to be going through all of it. Make sense? Let's go. All right, so let's talk about, very simply, the one that started it all, Ganondorf Dragmire of Ocarina of Time. This Ganondorf was crucial in creating the timeline itself, creating the split, making the Zelda timeline a mess because of the way that they inflicted their pain across Ocarina of Time's Hyrule and set the standard for what Ganondorf should be. In this way, I think that Ganondorf's character is pretty well fleshed out. There have been plenty of theory videos about what we think about Ganondorf's motivations within this game. There's been plenty of other reasons that this guy is just the core of it all, and I think he is exactly what defines a Ganondorf. I am by no means an Ocarina of Time purist. I am not one of those people who thinks Ocarina of Time is his best game. In fact, I've got like 3 or 4 games ahead of Ocarina of Time in my personal opinion. But I think this Ganondorf set the stage for what Ganondorf Dragmire's character was going to be the entire time. Now we're going to take a look at the Fallen Heroes timeline of events. So the Fallen Heroes timeline is the idea that the hero was defeated in Ocarina of Time and Ganon spread his power and hatred throughout the world. And so we're going to start with the game A Link to the Past and move on from there as we go through the rest of the games, following to Oracle of Seasons and Ages, A Link Between Worlds, Legend of Zelda, and the Adventure of Link. Let's get started. And now we go on to what I think is the purest form of Ganondorf's Ganon incarnation. Following the Fallen Heroes timeline, we see that Ganon kills Link in Ocarina of Time and is so thrust with the power of the Triforce, and stays within the Beast Ganon form, still maintains his intellect, but is driven by wrath and by power. And this is, in my opinion, the most pointed, direction-based Ganon we've ever seen. And I think A Link to the Past does this very well. While we don't see this character throughout the game making like micro changes, as we can definitely see Agaham do the majority of the plot driving from the evil standpoint in this game, this Ganon was the pure representation of a driven beast. And that is what makes him such a fearsome enemy in this game. The next one on the list is the Ganon from the Oracle games. And without getting too much into it, he's going to be my first D tier. And he's going to be my first D tier mainly for the fact that he is, at his core, a resurrection and a failed resurrection at that. Where he is not really sentient, has no drive, just literally malice incarnate, literally evil incarnate. He is not attempting to do anything. He was risen by the Twin Rova sisters, and not even risen well at that. They failed the sacrifice, and now they are sitting with just a husk of a beast that is just blindly swinging at you. It's not even really that good of a final boss fight, to be completely fair. And at the end of the day, this is kind of what we're left with, and it's just meh. So next we're going on to A Link Between Worlds, which is actually a newer version of Ganon that we really haven't seen before, in the fact that, yeah, he's technically a Ganon, but he also becomes Yuga Ganon as well, which isn't exactly like the normal Ganon we're used to seeing. It's him fusing with another being to create something morphed and gross. And so this Ganon isn't necessarily like the main antagonist of the game. We'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But he is definitely the little whisper in the ear of the main antagonists in this game that allows his will to be done through these little puppets that aren't really puppet Ganons, but just his little puppets that kind of feed through the world and make the main antagonists of Hilda and of Yuga make this whole tragedy unfold. And so for that, I think he goes a little bit above like what is a beast Ganon, right? Where we have this whispering, this like drive to become resurrected and become pure evil incarnate again, but having to work through puppets and be the whisper in the ear. And I think that shows a little bit of deception and cool things. And actually, I'm going to take him out of C tier and put him in B, just sheer off that, because if you think about the behind the scenes, Hilda just wants to save her kingdom, and Yuga is Hilda's sage and wants to be able to make low rule great again, for lack of better words. And they are being manipulated by Ganon to believe this is the only way that they can do that. And then Yuga Ganon is the embodiment of that. I think it's a good character overall. And the final iteration of Ganon within the Fallen timeline is going to be the one from The Legend of Zelda, the original game, and The Adventure of Link. This Ganon is not really like anything but a plot device, an antagonist to make you adventure through the worlds that exist in Zelda 1 and 2. And it's just the big bad, like kind of how Bowser wasn't fully fleshed out in the Mario series before this. He was just kind of the beginning. He had no real backstory. He just stole the Triforce and Zelda broke up the other Triforce into a bajillion pieces. Go find it. Like, Zelda is more of a driving force in this game than Ganon as an antagonist is. And so for that, I'm going to give him a C. Like, he was the one that started it all, but there's no drive, no character development. And for me, that takes me out of a game. And maybe this is because I never played the games like right when they came out, because I was just too young. I was an embryo. And so I think at the end of the day, this character just doesn't do it for me like the other Ganondorfs and Ganons that we'll talk about later. And without further ado, let's go to the end of the timeline where the hero is triumphant in two different ways, the child and the adult timelines. I'm going to start with the child timeline because it's kind of short, and then we can move right on to the adult timeline. But the child timeline is essentially where they are able to stop Ganon, kill him, go back in time, and Link is able to warn Zelda about Ganondorf before it all starts and stop Ganondorf in his tracks before he even gets a chance to start. And this is one version of Ganondorf as the timelines start to come back together, as we're kind of theorizing with Tears of the Kingdom, that I think is super powerful to remember. Because at the end of the day, this Ganondorf is literally hatred incarnate, and also still fully sentient and fully crafting its way back into the world, out of the Sacred Realm, out of the Twilight Realm, and trying to just will everything with pure hate and malcontent. And I think this is the Ganondorf that I love a lot, because it shows what going absolutely mad but still having the brain of a deviant is supposed to be. Do I think this is a great representation of how you can define a character and how you can almost empathize with your antagonist? No, because I think a really good antagonist makes you empathize with them. And I think this one is just pure villainy, one that you can fully root against because everything they stand for is manipulation, hatred, and everything like that. And I feel like there are two ends to the spectrum of what you want out of a Ganon or Ganondorf. You want pure embodiment of hatred, pure malice, pure villainy, pure scheme, right? Which is what we kind of started to see in Ocarina of Time. And then you want the other version of Ganon or Ganondorf that I'll get into later in the timeline that is just cunning, but also empathetic in the character's point of view. And so I think this Twilight Princess Zelda, or this Twilight Princess Ganondorf, is a perfect embodiment of what the pure hatred and drive and scheming can be in the Ganondorf form, which is why I think it deserves to go in A tier right next to the Link of the Past Ganon, because while you have the perfect beast over here doing one thing and being like pure malicious, just actionable intent, and then you have the devious, deceptive, making Zant do most of the heavy lifting, but also being the puppeteer behind the thing to finally will taking over Hyrule Kingdom towards the end of the game. Yes, he's one of those antagonists that sits in the back and just waits for you to get there when he's at the throne room, but also you see the puppeteering that he goes through with Zant and with Midna and all of the other minor antagonists throughout the game. And I think this makes him a fantastic Ganondorf. Then we go to Four Swords Adventures. This is another reincarnation of Ganondorf that just goes wrong and makes him a beast Ganon that is just, you know, he's one of those, it's one of those things where like a lot of Ganons are actually just reincarnated and reincarnated so haphazardly because we the hero stop it, right? So that it's just like, I am just pure malice, swinging and fighting and blah, 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 blah. And this is another perfect pure example of this, because this isn't the main driving force, right? Vati is the main driving force throughout the Four Swords Adventures games that actually like, you know, bring forth all of the reckoning and the evil. And then this is just, hey, we're trying to bring back the Dark Lord. And the Dark Lord is who you fight because we're trying to bring him back, and theoretically he's more powerful than me. No actionable driving force, no plot driven, right? And so like when I say Ganon in Ganondorf are like the most plot rich Zelda villain, I think there is a way to say it that isn't this, you know? And it was just one of those like haphazardly put together Zelda or Ganons that I just didn't really like at all. Now we're going to talk about my favorite Ganondorf. And we go to my favorite Ganondorf. I love this Ganondorf mostly for the fact that it is the most developed I feel a Ganondorf character has ever been. And this is one of the reasons that I love this Ganondorf so much, because it makes you almost empathize with the plight that he has faced and his reasoning for wanting to take over Hyrule again, wanting to make Hyrule great, instead of wanting to see its downfall and its demise. And this is after years of after being defeated by the hero of time, being struck down and watching the Hyrule that he wanted to rule get flooded and refilled to become the Great Sea. And now we have Wind Waker Ganondorf, my favorite Ganondorf in the series. And the reason that I love Wind Waker Ganondorf so much is because he, like I said earlier, is the pure embodiment of an empathetic antagonist. Somebody that the player, somebody that even just onlookers from the game can empathize with the fact that he went for something. He didn't know why he went for something. He didn't know that he was the pure embodiment of Demise's hatred. He didn't know that he was just a reincarnation of an ancient force. He was driven by the ability to want to save his people, to want to save the Gerudo, to want to make them more triumphant again as they get blasted and shamed by the rest of the Hyrule kingdoms. And I empathize with this character so much as a player, because as much as he is terrible and does terrible things with the Helmarock King and the travesties that he throws upon the Great Sea, he truly does have a piece of him that the character that can empathize with, and that makes him a more developed character. He's more strong-willed, more cunning, more careful, more articulate, and I feel like this is what Ganondorf could have been had it been given more time to actually like plan and deceive and decept, and also understand that he is still human and not always having Demise's hatred screaming in his ear like the Twilight Princess representation of this Ganondorf, because they are one and the same, just given different key plot life points. And I feel that this Ganondorf from Wind Waker is an S-tier Ganondorf. In fact, I think he's better than the original Ocarina of Time Ganondorf. He has every reason, every thought process completely thought out, a pure understanding of what he wants, and you feel that in every single one of his motivations. And I feel like he's just the most included Ganondorf in all of the series. You actually get to interact with him multiple times before the final battle, and he explains his reasoning to you. He makes a plea. And I feel like that makes him the best Ganondorf. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below, because I know that that is going to be pretty controversial in the actual scheme of it all. Now, this part's going to get a spoiler warning because we are at the end of the timeline that has Ganondorf's in it that hasn't been like fully properly placed because of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So if you haven't played those games or you haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom yet, or especially the memory side quest within Tears of the Kingdom, I highly recommend going to complete the Dragon Tears side quest before finishing this video. I also have another video about Tears of the Kingdom that you should go check out as well. But I want to talk about this Ganondorf because I feel like he's pretty fleshed out as well. But at the end of the day, I just feel like it's not as fleshed out as a Twilight Princess Ganondorf or a Wind Waker Ganondorf. And I want to make my kind of reasoning as to why. So we can make one argument about these two Ganon and Ganondorfs, right? Because at the end of the day, technically Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf comes first in the timeline. I am going to do Breath of the Wild first just because we don't really experience Ganondorf in his entirety and his deception and all that jazz until we start to do Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm going to do Calamity Ganon first and kind of talk about this Ganon all together as one because it is technically kind of in the same part of the Zelda universe in that Breath of the Wild kingdom. And so because of the direct sequel, we're going to start with Calamity Ganon. And Calamity Ganon, in my opinion, is another one of those Ganons that's just pure malice, pure driven by just the utter reckoning and destruction of the kingdom. I feel like it's a little bit better than like the other Ganons that I've put in D tier because there's actually like sentience to it. And if you think about it, and this is more talk spoilers, so if you again talk spoilers, but this is definitely like the Ganondorf that was after Ganondorf Dragmire, because these are different Ganondorfs technically, because all of the ones that we've talked about until now were Ganondorf Dragmire. This is a new entity Ganondorf, the next king to be spawned into the Gerudo. And so this Ganondorf is still coming from the grave because he is technically held in a stasis until he fully gets revived and talk. And so it's one of those things for me that like there's still a drive, there's still an intention, but Calamity Ganon is one of those entities that is just sitting there like doing the will of its master. It is essentially a puppet Ganon. And so like while it technically has drive and has intent, taking over the divine beast, showing cunning nature, it's not it doing all of that. It is just an embodiment of the hatred of the individual that is the Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf. And so I don't know. Honestly, in my opinion, I think Calamity Ganon is gonna go like next to Yuga Ganon in my opinion. It's not like the best Ganondorf we've ever seen, but it's definitely better than the original Ganondorf and then the reincarnation attempts that are just mindless zombies. And it has like intent behind it. I don't think it's as good as Yuga Ganon, in my opinion, when I overthink Yuga Ganon, because Yuga Ganon is, I don't know, a lot of people are gonna hate me for putting Calamity Ganon behind Yuga Ganon, but I think that's kind of where he sits. Because at the end of the day, and again, it's just a puppeteer of this Tears of the Kingdom Ganon. TikTok Ganon? TikTok Ganon. It's not a TikTok Ganon. And now we're on to the last Ganondorf and the newest Ganondorf in the series. Now that we've eliminated Ganondorf Dragmire, the one that dies in the end of the Wind Waker or dies in the end of Twilight Princess, a new Ganondorf was reincarnated into the Gerudo tribe. About when the timelines reconverge, a lot of people are theorizing that the timeline has like another dragon break where all the timelines converge and they're all real and blah, 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 blah. But anyway, long story short, the other Ganondorf Dragmire dies. And now we can reincarnate Ganondorf back into a Gerudo male, into the Gerudo tribe. And now we have the new Ganondorf, the one of Tears of the Kingdom. And he is driven. He, in my opinion, is the epitome of a pure villain. He has no intent of benefiting the Gerudo. He has no intent of just wanting to do something better and using those motivations and getting twisted by Demise's hatred. He is just, I want power, I want it all, and I'm driven to destroy everything in my path to get so. And I think upon that, getting the power of a secret stone and getting eventually draconified into becoming this beast of pure pain, pure power, pure malice, being able to manipulate under the scenes of the Hyrule that we know and love from Breath of the Wild. For so long, I think at the end of the day that this is a good Ganondorf. I really honestly think that this is still an S tier Ganondorf, Mostly because I feel like there is definite motive. They have a motive. It's not like the best motive in the world, but it's seeking power. It's seeking to destroy, and the manipulation and the cunning that he develops throughout what we see in the Dragon Tears quest, and then what we see in the final battle. We get it. You know, he's got an intention. He has personality, deception, cunning, all of the jazz that we expect out of a main villain. You know, he's just seeking power. You know, there isn't any definition of that. This is what I wished Twilight Princess Ganondorf was. I think this Ganondorf is a better fleshed out Twilight Princess Ganondorf, and I feel like it's better than Link of the Past Ganon. And so I think it's either top of A or S minus. And I feel like that's a good place to put it, but there's like no separation of the tiers, and I'm not going to develop a tier just for Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf. So you guys let me know in the comments what you think of all these placements. At the end of the day, this is my tier list. Let me know what you guys think about all the Ganondorfs throughout history, in the Legend of Zelda lore, in the timeline. Do you think that a lot of the theorists that I referenced in this video for a lot of the way that the timeline breaks down makes sense? Do you think that Ganondorf is the best villain in the Legend of Zelda series, and in my opinion, one of the best villains in all of gaming? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's pretty much it. If you guys like this video, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and watch some other videos that I've made of Tears of the Kingdom already. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Go ahead and check out the Discord so you can continue to yell at me about how I'm an idiot, or leave a comment. Either way, up to you. And I'll see you in the next one. Okay, thanks.